All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a little journey deep into a lost community in Vermont. This isn't just any old place, it's a real American ghost town, and boy, does it have a story to tell. So take a look at this. This is the Almiron Goodell farmhouse. It's actually the last house still standing in what used to be the bustling community of Ricker Basin. Okay, so let's dive in and see what stories are hidden in these woods. So what exactly silenced this place? Well, to figure that out, we've got to hike back into the past. We're going to follow the old trails of Little River State Park, where the forest has literally swallowed up a forgotten piece of history. All right, first up, life on Ricker Mountain. Let's try to uncover what this community actually looked like in its prime. Okay, so check out this old map. This thing is like our guide to the past. We're talking the mid-1800s here. About 50 families, names like the Rickers and the Goodalls, they literally carved a life out of this mountain. I mean, clearing rocks, pulling stumps, just to build their homes and farms. And get this, life was tough. This was a mountain community settled way back in the early 1800s. It grew to about 50 families, and their whole economy was driven by 3 timber sawmills. One of those mills was even making gun stocks for World War I. But you gotta remember, the landscape was steep, the soil was terrible. What's so amazing is how self-sufficient they were. They had to be, right? Just to survive that harsh Vermont landscape. Just look at this comparison. On one side, you have the prosperous 250-acre Gideon Ricker farm, and now it's just a stone foundation and some rusted metal. I mean, wow, it's such a powerful way to see the passage of time. All that's left of these once thriving farms are just these little echoes in the forest. You know, it wasn't just a bunch of isolated farms either. This was a real community. They had a schoolhouse and everything. And get this little fun fact. Life was so tied to the seasons that kids were actually allowed to stay home during what they called mud time because, well, the roads were just a total mess. Can you imagine getting a mud day off from school? Okay, but as we dig a little deeper, the story of Ricker Basin, it takes a much darker turn. We're about to uncover some really unsettling stories of madness, murder, and yeah, even hauntings that still linger in the local lore. So let's talk about one of the most disturbing tales from this area. It all started in a nearby farmhouse with a Civil War veteran named Matthew McCaffrey. He returned home from the war, but he didn't come back whole. Something was wrong. Madness started to take hold. He began making these wild claims, like his horse was going to kill his family. You can imagine, his neighbors started to get really concerned. The man they knew, he just wasn't there anymore. And then, one night, it all came to a head. He heard the cries of wild animals outside, and he just snapped. He took an axe to his own wife and mother. It was an absolutely horrific act of violence, and his paranoia just boiled over. His 14-year-old son managed to escape, thank God, and McCaffrey was confined for the rest of his life. But here's the really haunting part. The apple orchard he planted. They say it's still there. A quiet, really unsettling reminder of that grim, grim day. But the darkness in Ricker Basin, it doesn't end there. There's another tragedy, one that's literally etched in stone in a local cemetery. Just listen to this inscription on the gravestone of a 9-year-old girl named Alice Meeker. Oh, the agony and grief when the poisonous cup was given, and death came to her relief, and Alice sleeps in heaven. Chilling, right? So what happened to little Alice? Well, the story is just awful. First, this mysterious Uncle Almond moves in with Alice and her grandmother. Then, for some reason, maybe fearing the child would talk about something she saw, someone gives her poison. They then put her body in a wagon and buried her in a swamp while she was possibly still alive. In the end, the grandmother was convicted, and she became the only woman ever hanged for murder in the entire history of Vermont. Just a brutal, twisted story. So with stories like that buried in the soil, is it any surprise that people think Ricker Basin is haunted? It's really no wonder that legends have sprung up. And some hikers have reported some very strange encounters out there. Okay, so one of the most chilling tales I've heard comes from an experienced hunter. He's camping out on the mountain, and one night, he wakes up because he feels his tent strap being tugged. The next morning, he checks it out, and it had been cleanly cut with a knife. It gets weirder. On his final night, he says something violently grabbed his sleeping bag. Just grabbed it. When he's packing up to get the heck out of there, he discovers something. One of the stones he used to build his fire pit, it wasn't a stone. It was an old, forgotten headstone. He had been camping on someone's grave. Gives you the shivers, doesn't it? But you know what? As terrifying as all these stories of murder and ghosts are, they're not what really killed Ricker Basin. Nope. It was something way more powerful. Something the community just couldn't fight. The end of Ricker Basin wasn't sudden. It was a slow burn followed by a knockout punch. You see, by the late 1800s, families were already starting to leave because the conditions were just so harsh. Then, in 1927, a massive flood just devastated the community. That pretty much sealed its fate. A second flood in 34 drove out the last few families. And finally, between 1935 and 38, the Waterbury Dam was built, submerging a huge chunk of the land forever. So, our hike through the past is coming to an end. What's actually left of this place? What does the forest remember? Well, for one, the cemeteries are still there. And what's incredible is that the headstones are in remarkably good condition. You can still read the inscriptions on the graves of Florence and Simon Ricker, nearly a century old. It's amazing to see their names, still there, marking the final resting places of the people who built this town. But for me, the most powerful thing you see out there are the stone walls. Just think about the countless hours of back-breaking work it took to build these things. And now, they just stretch endlessly through the overgrown forest, a perfect symbol of all that hard work, being slowly reclaimed by nature. So, you see, a ghost town like Ricker Basin is so much more than just ruins. It's a place of life, of hardship, of memory, all of it now returned to the silence of the forest. It really holds the stories of the people who lived and worked and died here. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? What stories will the places we leave behind tell about us? It's a pretty powerful reminder that the land, it remembers long after we're gone. Thanks for joining me on this little exploration.